So at this point I have gotten a first layer of paint on my whole flower. And you can see it's starting to take form. It's certainly still very choppy looking, but it's eventually going to smooth out once I start to add more finished layers. My glass is, I would say, probably 90% there. I worked in some darker values and around the handle areas, in this top area, and some around the base area down here into the section at the bottom. Now it's a transparent vase, and you can see here there's an indication of the back edge, and I've made it just a little bit more distinct in my painting than it actually appears in the photo, because I definitely want people to get the idea that this is transparent. The reflection of the grapes is that darker blue shape, which does appear here. I've made it a little bit more pronounced. And of course the blue is a little different than the blue that we actually can make from the two blues that we have, but it's okay. It doesn't have to match the colors exactly. I do have my first layer on all of my grapes, including the stem. In this video I'm going to tackle the cast shadow from the vase and from the grapes, and I'm going to start with how to approach the leaves. So I got a first layer in on these 4 leaves here. That one got a little dark, but that's okay. It's pretty dark in the photo, so you can see there in the photo it's a very dark leaf. But this leaf here, this one's going to be easy, but this one here, it actually has these sections in the back side of that leaf that are formed by the veining in the leaf. So I want to make sure that I'm probably going to treat, I am going to treat each of those sections almost as a separate leaf in itself, because each one has a gradient. So if you'll notice, it goes from this lighter value to a very dark color, then it starts again with a lighter value and gradates to a dark value, starts with a light value and then gets darker and then gets lighter again on that last section. So I'm going to handle that as 3 individual sections. I'm going to start with this one here. Now on my palette, I already have my color mixed up, and for the color of this leaf tone, what I did was I mixed a little bit of our Hooker's Green with some of the Burnt Umber, which is the darker of the 2 browns in your set. So I'm going to start, and I'm working with the number 4 brush because I feel like that's an appropriate size brush for the size of these sections. If you find that you have trouble controlling the water on your brush, at this point you could switch to a smaller brush. That'll help give you less water to deal with. But if you're getting a pretty good handle on the water amount in your brush, you can certainly use a 4. I wouldn't go any bigger than that with a space as small as I have if yours is comparatively the same size. So the complementary color for green is red. So I'm going to be using some red in the shadow areas. So this is a gradient on this section of the leaf that goes from lighter and gets darker along here and across here. So I'm going to put some red. And I know this may seem very counterintuitive to put red where we're going to be putting green, but it's going to actually create that natural shadow tone that I desire in those spaces. So it looks like my paper's slightly dry there. So I'm going to quickly rinse my brush, and I'm going to add just a little bit of water along that edge just to soften it. It blended nicely along this bottom edge here, but not so much along there. So I want to make sure that's good and wet. So I'm just going to kind of re-wet along there and make sure that's soft. I don't want a hard edge. All right, that's better. And now I'm going to take some of the greenish brown color that I have, and I'm going to paint that color in here. Looks like I got fairly light, so I want to get a little bit more on my brush. That's better. And I'm going to take that green color right down over the top of the red. And blend it right over the red. And when the red and the green mix together, it's going to give me that natural shadow tone that I want. And it still looks pretty light, so I'm going to get just a bit more color on my brush of the green tone. Still looks pretty light. That's a little better. All right, so there's my first section. You can see it's not quite as dark as it is here, but it's getting there. So I'm going to hit it just a little bit more because I feel like there's, yeah, that's better. That's what I wanted. Because I want to make sure that I have that darker value in there. I'm going to make it a little less blotchy. Blend that a little bit. Just a little bit of water on my brush. Blend that out. Alright, so that can blend in, it should, again, it's still a little bit lighter than this, but that's okay. At least I got the dark where I want it to be, so that should be okay. So I'm going to repeat that for the other sections in there. This leaf up here I could actually address now. So again, I'm going to be doing the same process. This leaf is lighter. I'm going to just wet it, plain water. Make sure you're careful that you don't get water anywhere else other than where you're going to be painting. And again, I'm going to grab some red. And in this case, it's the red, the darker areas are along here. There's a little bit in here, and a little bit along this edge. So it's not terribly dark, but now this leaf is a little bit brighter green. So I'm going to grab some of my brighter green tone that I've got prepared. And I'm going to start in the area up in here, and I'm going to blend it right over the top of the red sections. And I just wanted to get a little bit of a color change on there. I wish I had stayed a little bit more red along here, so I'm going to add a little bit more. Deeper color along there. Alright, so I'm going to let that rest. So again, this isn't my finished layer, but it will get me at least in a direction. So now I'm going to, I would finish my leaf out. I will be finishing my leaf out to finish the first layer of color, and I'll come back when that's finished. But I do want to, in this video, talk about cast shadows. So I'm going to reposition my camera over here a little bit. And I want to talk for just a minute about the cast shadows that I have to deal with. So I've got this blue shadow here because the glass is blue and the light's going through the blue and casting the shadow. It has a soft edge to it. I also have the cast shadow from the grapes, which is almost the same color as my background in this photo. But in my painting I made it a little bit more red, so I'm going to be using almost probably Payne's Gray almost straight up here for my cast shadows. So I want to keep my photo handy as I'm working, but I need to wet this whole area. I don't have any cast shadows on this side, so I don't have to wet that, and this grape runs off the page, so I'm good to just wet this whole section through here. And in order to wet that and keep it wet, I'm going to work with my number 6, which has a really nice point on it, and I'm going to start in the tiny sections where there's more detail. And I could get by without wetting the entire section if the shadows were small, but I need to wet way wider than the shadows are. So I need to make sure that I go out far enough beyond where the shadows fall. For mine, I feel like I probably need to go the whole section just because my shadows are fairly good size, and I don't want to crowd anything, and I don't want to get any what we call as a bloom, which is when the paint, wet paint hits dry edge and it creates an edge that we don't want, and the bloom can appear if wet hits wet paint before it's ready. So I just don't want to get any kind of issue with the way that the paint's drying. I want to make sure that I can get the effect that I want. Alright, so this is all wet. I just wet that whole section with my number 6 brush, and I'm going to be grabbing a little bit, and again, I can't really match the blue of my photo, but I'm going to use similar blue to what's on my painting. And so for me, that's going to give me this, the ultramarine. So this ultramarine color is going to create my cast shadow. I'm looking at my photograph, and there's a darker edge here and along the little V shape at the bottom of the shadow. And it's okay if it bleeds some, because it is a soft edge in my photograph as well. But I am going to take a brush, and I just kind of squeezed it dry, and I'm going to run a brush down that side. You see how that kind of cleaned up any feathering edges. I don't like that blue there, so I'm going to clean my brush and see if I can mop some of that up just a bit. That blended away just fine. Oops. All right. So now that I have that kind of in place, and it probably is a little crisper line there than I would like. And now I'm going to work, so now that got a little dry in there, but I think it's still okay. I'm going to work with some of the Payne's Gray to create my cast shadows in here. And the reason why I'm not too concerned with that getting a little drier, you can see it's a little bit drier in here, still gave me a nice little bleed edge there, so I'm hoping that if I just get my color where I need it, I should be able to get a softness there that I want. It's a little crisper on the grapes than it was on the vase, so that's okay if it's a little bit crisper. I'm just going to fill in my cast shadow here, and then I'm going to be able to let this rest overnight. And while that's wet, I'm going to grab just a little bit more intense color and get it along this edge, because I like my shadows, just like we learned with our sphere, to be deeper against the object. And make sure that that edge is nice and strong. That's better. All right, so from there, this has to dry, and I'll be able to come back when for my second level of value on the grapes and the flower, and finish up my leaf, and then I should be able to show you how to take this out to the end, and we'll remove the masking fluid and finish up any additional parts.